Good morning and welcome to IU Sports Sunday here on WGCL. Nick Rotocap with you. This is the final show of 2025, and the reason why, well, there's a certain football game that's taking place a week from Thursday, New Year's Day in Pasadena, and I will be there. And it's the Rose Bowl, and the matchup is set. Indiana versus Alabama, number 1 versus number 8. Yeah, number 1 Indiana facing number 8 Alabama, which, if you would have told somebody that was happening, said, hey, 2 years ago in 2023, you would have said, hey, number 1 Indiana is facing number 8 Alabama in the Rose Bowl. I would have said, huh? Are you talking about the basketball and not realizing that the Rose Bowl is a football game? No. Oh, well, something must have gone severely wrong in the simulation. But no, it's set. Alabama and Oklahoma, interesting game on Friday night. Very interesting game. Oklahoma started by leading 17-0 early in the second quarter. I, along with everybody else, was thinking, man, the haters were right about Alabama. They don't belong. And then the rest of the game happened, and I didn't know what to think. A lot of self-inflicted mistakes for Oklahoma. A lot of self-inflicted mistakes. And I think the one thing that this first round of college football playoff games really taught us is how well coached and how well disciplined and how measured Indiana football is top to bottom. Alabama, Oklahoma, Bama wins 34-24 in Norman, becoming the first road team to win a first-round CFP game since the field expanded to 12 teams a couple years ago, or I guess last year. There was a lot of very sloppy special teams play. I mean, Tate Sandell, the Lou Groza Award winner for best kicker in the nation, missed 2 late field goals for Oklahoma. And Oklahoma also had a botched punt where the punter just inexplicably dropped the snap. There was also, and this was, I think, a key play in the game. I don't know whether or not it was overlooked because I feel like a lot of people recognize the importance of it. It was a short punt by Oklahoma, a 32-yard punt that was returned to the plus 35 that led to Alabama scoring a touchdown to take a 34-24 lead, which ultimately ended up being the final score. A lot of special teams mistakes in this game. And I think the plus for Indiana, I think a lot of people on the Indiana side were hoping that Indiana would match up against Alabama. I thought Oklahoma would present a bigger challenge for Indiana because of its defense. The Sooners' defense on par with Indiana as one of the best in the nation. It didn't look that way on Friday night. And I thought that they were going to be better. I didn't think that they were going to give up 34 points to Alabama. But they did. And I think the biggest weaknesses for Bama going in against Indiana, one, the run game, non-existent for Bama against Oklahoma, averaging 1.1 yards per carry, 28 yards on 25 carries. That is not going to cut it against Indiana. You are going to have to run the ball. And I don't know. I don't know that Bama's going to be able to get it done. Because obviously it's just one game, but I mentioned that Oklahoma's defense comparable to Indiana in its success this year. Oklahoma was winning games off the back of its defense. So it's going to be tough sledding for them. And for Alabama, the run game has been a season-long issue for the Tide. Second worst rushing offense in the SEC, averaging just 110 yards per game. 110 rushing yards per game. Only LSU was worse at 106. By way of comparison, Vanderbilt, Georgia, Arkansas, Texas A&M, all above 180 yards per game. And then Missouri clears everybody at 234 yards per game. So Bama cannot run the ball. Now, you think back to the regular season for Indiana. The one game that the Hoosiers played against a team that could not run the ball that really sticks out to me was against Maryland. And that game was a blowout because the Terps they could not, and that was something that we knew was going to be a problem for them going into that game. I remember in my prep for that game, that was one of the things I noticed was, oh, wow, Malik Washington throws the ball a lot, Maryland's quarterback. We may see something similar when Indiana faces Alabama in the Rose Bowl on New Year's Day. That Ty Simpson, who was once a Heisman hopeful, the quarterback for Alabama, probably going to have to go to the air a fair bit. And to be clear, he does have some weapons in the passing game. In particular, I thought that Isaiah Horton had a great day. Jeremy Bernard also made a phenomenal catch. But Simpson against Oklahoma, 18 to 29 for 232 yards and 2 touchdowns. No picks. No picks is key because John Mateer did throw an interception. And it was costly. I thought that Oklahoma's quarterback, John Mateer, he was very hot and cold against Alabama. He made some of the best throws that I've seen, and then he followed that up by making some of the worst throws I've ever seen. Making some of the worst decisions I've seen. And I'm thinking, man, Fernando Mendoza clears these guys. And it goes to show what coaching can do, what preparation can do. Good coaching and preparation. But the bottom line is Indiana, on paper, should beat Alabama. Should. Now, obviously, these games are not played on paper. But I thought going into the SEC championship, after the way Bama played, going into the first round game, I thought that Oklahoma had the edge being at home, given the way Alabama played in the SEC championship. I thought Oklahoma was going to win that game. And early on, I think so did everybody else. But the comeback, you can frame it in one of two ways. It's either a meltdown for Oklahoma or a comeback for Alabama. I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's a really, really good job by Alabama of outscoring Oklahoma 34-7 after about the 10-minute mark in the second quarter when the Sooners took that 17-0 lead. That was really impressive. Really, really impressive. And so for the Hoosiers, getting their first ever shot at Alabama. They've never played. First meeting in history between these two programs, both of whom have been around for a long time. One has had much more success than the other. Will come at the Rose Bowl with a spot in the college football playoff semifinal on the line. The bracket, outside of that, goodness gracious, yesterday, Miami, Texas A&M. Swirling winds. There were a whole bunch of missed field goals. Ultimately, Miami won 10-3, scoring a late touchdown in the final couple of minutes. And Marcel Reed, the Texas A&M quarterback, threw an interception in the end zone to seal it. The Hurricanes beat the Aggies 10-3. Miami will take on Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl. And then the later two games yesterday went about as we expected. Ole Miss blew out Tulane 41-10, much like what happened in the regular season. James Madison battled against Oregon, but Oregon had a red-hot first half and won 51-34. So we'll get to the debate of, do Group of 5 teams belong in the playoff? Well, they do, but there's more to it than just that. Alabama, as I've discussed, I think, before on this show, but it's definitely worth repeating. Bama has plenty of coaches that were here in Bloomington. Of course, the head coach, Kalen DeBoer, was Indiana's offensive coordinator. You think back to 2019, that Outback Bowl season. Now, what happened in the Outback Bowl will not be brought up on this show because it violates the Geneva Convention's rules on cruel and unusual punishment. Nick Sheridan, quarterback's coach at Alabama, former offensive coordinator. Sheridan has accepted the offensive coordinator job at Michigan State under Pat Fitzgerald. To Michigan State fans, I say, good luck. Good luck. Don't watch IU film from 2021, but good luck. Kane Womack, of course, the defensive coordinator, had the same title here in Bloomington. The defensive backs coach Jason Jones, former safeties coach at Indiana, and Alabama's strength coach David Ballou, an alum and former strength coach at IU. So some people are calling Alabama IU Tuscaloosa, the Alabama satellite campus for the Indiana University system. Makes you think, for sure. But I wonder how Curt Cignetti feels about this. Honestly, he probably doesn't feel anything because that's just the way he operates. I don't think he is thinking about this one way or another. But part of me wonders, considering his time under Nick Saban as an assistant at Alabama, when so many of Saban's assistants got high-profile head coaching jobs right after working for him, Cignetti had to take the scenic route. And by scenic, of course, I mean going down to the Division II level, coaching for pennies compared to what he was making at Alabama, and then working his way up. IU Pennsylvania, Elon, James Madison, and now IU. Part of me wonders if Cignetti is going to have an extra chip on his shoulder going into the Rose Bowl. Not that he needs it, obviously. I mean, we know how he is. He's a maniac on the sidelines. But I do also wonder how much the bye is going to impact Indiana, because if you remember back to last year, the playoff was chalky in the first round. All the home teams won, and then you get to the quarterfinal, and all the top seeds lost after going on a bye. Oregon got blown out by Ohio State in the Rose Bowl, and that was particularly surprising because Oregon had beaten everybody they'd faced to that point. They were undefeated, much like Indiana is, including winning the Big Ten. So it's going to be very intriguing because this time of year, there are two schools of thought. Indiana absolutely needed the bye in the playoff. The injuries were really stacking up, much like they were late in the regular season, and this is just an extended opportunity to get healthy. Make sure that everybody's at 100%. But the other school of thought is that when you're hot, you want to keep playing. You want to stay in rhythm. And Oregon did not obviously play in the conference championship game. So the Ducks, they went about 3 weeks without playing a game. They had a simulated game the week before the playoff game yesterday against JMU. That is something I would not be opposed at all to Indiana doing. But it would also be on or around Christmas Day. Well, you got to make sacrifices when you're playing in the postseason in college football. So it'll be very interesting to see how Indiana handles the bye, because if the top 4 seeds all lose in the NY6 Bowls, then I think we're going to have some conversations. Do you want a top seed in the playoff? Do you want to intentionally make sure you somehow get a 5 through 12 seed? I don't know. I'd imagine everybody would just say, oh, no, we want to win. But if the top seeds all lose again, then we're going to have some very intriguing conversations. Quarterfinal matchups are as follows. Number 5, Oregon against number 4, Texas Tech. That is at noon on ESPN on January 1st. That is the Orange Bowl. Indiana and Alabama later on in that day. Of course, the Rose Bowl. 4 p.m. Eastern on ESPN on January 1st. Number 9, Alabama. Number 1, Curt Cignetti's undefeated Indiana Hoosiers. And then the Sugar Bowl is the nightcap on New Year's Day. It's number 3, Georgia against number 6, Ole Miss. That's at 8 o'clock. And then the Cotton Bowl on New Year's Eve, number 2, Ohio State against number 10, Miami. Miami is in for a ride against Ohio State. Ohio State favored by 9.5 points in that game. That's a neutral site. All of these games are. But wow. I don't see how Miami stands a chance against Ohio State, especially with the Buckeyes coming off of the Big Ten championship loss. I don't know. Indiana gets the winner of Oregon, Texas Tech. I tell you, I don't know that I would want a rematch with the Ducks. Oregon's actually marginally favored in that game against Texas Tech by 1.5 points. And they're going to be, I think, the biggest case study of a hot team that keeps playing, that gets that first round game, versus Texas Tech. Obviously a really good team, but it's coming off an extended stretch of not playing a game, about 3 weeks off. And that's going to be interesting. If I'm an Indiana fan, I'm thinking I want Texas Tech, because Texas Tech is a more defensive-minded team than is Oregon. Oregon is more balanced. And again, given the fact that Indiana played Oregon earlier in the season, I wouldn't want to face them again. I don't think that Indiana is going to beat them twice. I think Oregon is too good for that. But the bottom line is Indiana is 2 wins away from playing for a national championship, and that in itself is absurd. No surprises as far as the postseason honors go after the Heisman. Curt Cignetti swept pretty much every Coach of the Year award. The debate that people are having now after the first round of the playoff, which Indiana did not play in this year, is does the group of 5 team deserve a spot, or excuse me, does the group of 5 deserve any representatives in the college football playoff? My answer is yes. Because you cannot look me in the eyes and tell me that 7-5 or 8-5 Duke deserved a bid to go get blown out by Ole Miss or Oregon. Because Duke was not one of the top 5 conference champions. Not at all. But they won the ACC because the ACC had stupid tiebreakers that led to an 8-4 team and a 7-5 team making the championship game. That's not Duke's fault. Duke just played who lined up against him on the other side. That's it. But to somehow insinuate that the group of 5 does not deserve to have any teams in the playoff, no. The problem with college football playoff expansion is not the group of 5. It's the fact that in any given season, there are not 12 teams that have a shot to win the national championship. There just aren't. We never should have expanded from 4 teams in the playoff. Because you go back and you look at some of those scores, there were blowouts in the 4-team playoff too. There were blowouts in the BCS national championship game, which was 1 versus 2. There are going to be blowouts in college football. That's just how it happens. But to assert that the group of 5 deserves to be punished because they earned their way in and got beaten by better teams, that's ridiculous. Because it was just last year in the first round that we also had a bunch of blowouts. But you didn't see people saying, oh, the SEC doesn't deserve a spot in the college football playoff. The Big Ten doesn't deserve a spot in the college football playoff. That's ridiculous, to be honest. Just ridiculous. And the first round scores from last year, obviously Indiana 27-17 losers to Notre Dame. That game was not as close as it looked in the final score. It was 27-3 with about 4 minutes left. Indiana never had a chance in that game outside of the first drive. Penn State, 28-point win over SMU. Ohio State, 42-17 over Tennessee. Clemson, Texas was the closest game, and that was 38-24. So now it's not, oh, these are just really, these teams are clearly just separated by multiple orders of magnitude. It's, the group of 5 doesn't deserve to be here because Ole Miss beat Tulane by 31. And James Madison got down early against Oregon, ultimately lost 51-34. I don't understand the logic other than most people who cover college football hate the sport. That's the only thing I can really think of at this point, is everybody who covers college football and has any sort of platform is absolutely miserable talking about it. And it's so weird because in college basketball, we celebrate the Cinderellas. We celebrated, for example, St. Peter's, Fairleigh Dickinson, and FDU. If you think back to 2023, FDU only made the NCAA tournament because Merrimack, the NEC champion, had not yet been in Division I for long enough to be eligible for the NCAA tournament. Merrimack beat FDU in the NEC championship and could not make the NCAA tournament because the NCAA has stupid rules on how long it takes to fully transition to Division I. We celebrated FDU when they took down Purdue. We celebrated St. Peter's when they also took down Purdue. We celebrated North Texas. We celebrated Loyola Chicago. We celebrate all these Cinderellas in college basketball. We celebrate Cinderellas in baseball. In college baseball. Obviously, college baseball is not followed as much up here. But when upsets happen in college baseball, it's seen as a good thing. But all of a sudden in college football, if a team even has a chance at an upset and they don't come through, they didn't deserve to be here. Now, last year, I agree, the seeding process was flawed. The conference champions should not have gotten the top 4 seeds. That's why Ohio State blowing out Tennessee in the 8-9 game is a little deceiving because Ohio State was not the 8th best team in the field. Not even close. Ohio State, as we saw in the regular season, was probably one of the 4 or 5 best teams in the field. Because the loss to Michigan really hurt them because they didn't make the Big Ten championship, which springboarded Penn State above them and ultimately saw them drop to the 8th seed. I agree that the seeding process was a little bit wrong last year, but I also don't think that the group of 5 should be punished because the ACC had stupid tiebreakers and did not have its 2 best teams in the conference championship game. I don't think that the group of 5 should be punished at all for this. I think that the group of 5 is going to be made the scapegoat for ounces and tons and countless amounts of television suit greed. That's what this is. That's why they added more playoff games. It's because they can make more money off of it. Even if those playoff games are lopsided, because, again, there are not 12 teams that have a chance to win the national championship. I said this yesterday on Twitter. You can follow me at Nick Rodecap, NickRodecap. I said that the 14 playoff had an air of exclusivity to it. You had to be close to perfect or perfect to get in. Losing really wasn't an option if you wanted to get into the 14 playoff. Now, we expand the field to 12, and the games get worse. Specifically, the first round games. The first round games got worse. Last year, there were 3 close games. 3 close games in the playoff. You had Texas and Arizona State in double overtime. That was in the Peach Bowl, which was a quarterfinal game. You had Notre Dame and Penn State in the Orange Bowl semifinal. That came down to the final drive. And then you had the national championship, which Ohio State won by 11 points. Didn't take a 2-score lead until late, if memory serves me correctly. You had 3 close games last year. The first round games, most of them were blowouts. The quarterfinals, well, you can't predict that those are going to be blowouts, but they were, except for Texas, Arizona State. Ohio State beat Texas by 2 scores. Texas never had a chance. Blowouts happen in college football. I don't think the group of 5 should be punished for blowouts happening. I think that the genie is out of the bottle at this point. This would have been a great year for a 4-team playoff. I've seen some people even saying, shoot, just give me a BCS national championship between Indiana and Georgia and call it a day. That would have been great. 4-team playoff with Indiana, Georgia, Ohio State, and Texas Tech. That would have been awesome. That would have been a really, really good field. Indiana, Texas Tech in a semifinal. The winner gets either Georgia or Ohio State in the national championship. We may get there anyway. We may end up at that juncture where it is chalk and the top 4 teams make it. I wish that for a moment, the people in power in college football, the decision makers, when it comes to deciding the playoff format, when it comes to deciding how the seeding is going to work, when it comes to negotiating the TV deals, I know they're not going to do this because money drives everything, but I wish it didn't. In a perfect world, we never should have gone away from the 4-team playoff. Because in the 4-team playoff, bowl games still meant something. They still kind of meant something. You obviously still had players opting out. And that's a whole nother conversation with the transfer portal. We need to stop pretending that student athletes are student athletes. They're athletes that happen to represent a school at this point. They are. I tell the story of how last spring I had a couple men's basketball players in one of my classes, and after the first day, they did not show up once. Because they're not student athletes anymore. We need to stop pretending. We need to stop forcing the transfer portal to line up with the academic calendar. Just give the athletes an extended drop ad period, move the portal to after the season, and call it a day. That's all you have to do. Move the portal to the end of January. Or to January 20th, the day after the national championship. That's it. That's all you have to do. Because then we don't have this problem where you have players opting out and bowl games not meaning anything and coaches jumping all over the place and all this. It doesn't have to be this way. But we added more playoff games out of greed. Because, oh, look, advertising dollars. Wow, amazing. More ticket sales, more merch, More. Now we're talking about more expansion. You mean that you want 16 teams in the playoff after watching back-to-back years where most of the first-round games weren't even close? There are not 16 teams in college football that have a chance at winning the national championship every year. That's just not how it works. The spread is too big between the good teams and the great teams in college football. And by the nature of the sport, it is harder for upsets to happen than it is in basketball or baseball, because those sports can be extremely fluky at times. It's hard to fluke your way to a win in a football game, but you can do it in basketball and baseball. I've seen it happen countless times. I've seen Indiana be on the other side of plenty of awful losses in baseball, even though on paper they were the much better team. Happens every year. That's just how the sport works. But it doesn't happen like that in football. But in the name of greed and in the name of dollar signs and in the name of advertisers and merchandise sales and gate receipts, we need to add more playoff games. No, we don't. I promise you we don't. Because it dilutes the meaning of the I would argue it dilutes the meaning of the NY6 bowl games. Because Indiana, let's just say that this was the BCS national championship, right? Indiana makes it after winning the Big Ten championship and plays, let's just say number 2, or I guess you could, okay, for simplicity's sake, we're going to put Indiana and Ohio State in the Rose Bowl for the national championship with the silver football, or the glass football at the end. The winner gets that trophy and wins the BCS national championship. That'd be amazing. Because then you could say you won a bowl game and you won a national championship. And it's the same game, and that gives each individual game more meaning. But you play in the Rose Bowl, and then, next week you have to play in the Peach Bowl, and then you play in the national championship. It makes each individual game mean less. Even though you can win multiple NY6 bowl games, and they're not really the NY6 bowls anymore, you can win multiple NY6 bowls and a national championship in the same year. It just, I don't like it. I don't like what college football has become, where we have the media talking about the entire year how certain teams don't even deserve to exist. That's all we had to hear about when it comes to Indiana for the entire year. Oh, Indiana doesn't deserve to be here. Who have they played? Oregon's not that good. Penn State's having a down year. They're not going to have a chance against Ohio State. Well, Indiana's beaten all of them. Indiana's not going to beat Alabama. The SEC is better. No. Did you watch Alabama, Oklahoma? It was objectively bad football. It was garbage football between two slightly above average teams as far as the SEC goes. I think this would have been a great year for a 4-team playoff. And it's a shame that everybody complained so much when they didn't get their way that we had to expand the field. Because I really don't think that one of the bottom 7 seeds ever had a chance. Obviously, Miami beat Texas A&M. Neither of those teams would have been in a 4-team field. I don't think that any of the bottom seeds have a chance. I don't think Alabama has a prayer against Indiana. I don't think Miami has a shot against Ohio State at all. Ole Miss maybe against Georgia. Those teams played in the regular season and Georgia won. That's going to be probably one of the more interesting games. Oregon, Texas Tech is a toss-up. I think Oregon is the only team outside of the top 4 that has a shot to win the national championship. But they probably would have accepted not making it into a 4-team playoff. Oh, yeah, we didn't beat Indiana. Okay, let's go win our bowl game. That's the way it should be. It shouldn't be, we went 9-3. We should be in the playoff and have a chance to play for a national title. No, you lost 3 games. You shouldn't have a shot. I'm looking at you, Alabama. Good on you for beating Oklahoma and taking advantage of their meltdown. But I think that we've gone too far with playoff expansion. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday on WGCL. Back here on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rotocap with you, talking about how the playoff field has gotten too big. The college football playoff, that is. The James Madison, Oregon game, JMU, I did not give them enough credit. They did more than just hang in there. And I will admit that after it got ugly early, I switched to Packers-Bears because I can't handle the double box on YouTube TV. I got to go just one game and call it a day. James Madison had over 500 yards of total offense. Outscored Oregon by 11 points in the second half. Dante Moore threw 2 interceptions. He also threw for 313 yards and 4 touchdowns. But he threw 2 picks. Oregon and JMU played an old-school Pac-12 game, 85 combined points, over 1,000 total yards of offense. Oregon players said after the game it felt like they lost. They didn't play any music in the locker room. James Madison more than deserved a shot. More than deserved a shot in the field. And if you're going to have a 12-team field in the playoff, I don't think we should. I didn't think Indiana had a chance against Notre Dame last year. Because even though, again, the seeding process was flawed, Notre Dame was better than a 7 seed. Indiana never had a chance at winning a national championship, if we're being honest. I don't think that the field should be 12 teams. Completely ignoring the group of 5 argument. I think it should just be the 4 best teams, the way it used to be. But if the field is going to be larger than 4, if it's going to be 12 teams, the group of 5 needs an auto bid. Or 2. I think. Because it gives more fan bases something to cheer for. It makes more games mean something over the course of the regular season. For example, earlier this season, Miami and South Florida, there was a thought after South Florida upset Florida in the Swamp, there was a thought that if USF could beat Miami and take care of business in conference play, the Bulls would be a shoo-in for the playoff. You also had Navy in the argument there for a little bit as well. North Texas had a shot with a freshman quarterback. North Texas had a chance to make the CFP. Old Dominion could have had a shot at one point this year. Kennesaw State had a chance to make the CFP. Had a chance. It was very small. Kennesaw State, though, did have a shot to make the CFP at some point this season. It makes more games mean something. It makes more games mean something when the group of 5 has a chance to make the CFP. And I am not a fan at all of just saying, okay, no, it needs to be the 11 best Power 4 teams plus Notre Dame. Absolutely not. No. That would be a very stupid way to go. Very, very stupid way to go. I don't think that is how it should be for a second. But you had 4 teams out of the American that could have made the playoff. Navy, Tulane, North Texas, and South Florida. They all had a chance. And then obviously in the Sun Belt, James Madison, Old Dominion ultimately ended up winning 10 games. These teams having a chance at the CFP means more games carry greater significance during the season. And we shouldn't take that away from those fan bases. Because if they're not playing for a chance at the CFP, and we've already taken the meaning away from bowl games, then what's the point? For them just to exist as cannon fodder for everyone else? No. And I don't like the way college football has gone. There's so much greed. Everybody is trying to squeeze as much money out of it as possible. Utah allowing a private equity firm to take a stake in its athletic department. What does private equity do to everything it touches? It squeezes all the cash out, takes away what made that thing great, and then ultimately dumps it for scraps once the private equity firm has taken as much money out of it as they can. That's what happens every single time private equity takes over something. They ruin it. What are they? Are they going to strip away Utah's support staff because they're just a useless expense? Oh, they're not the ones calling the plays. They're not the ones managing the equipment. Well, actually, they are the ones managing the equipment. They're not the ones playing the games. They're not the ones dealing with the broadcast partners. We don't need them. Why are we paying for visiting teams to come play bye games at Rice-Eccles Stadium? We don't need that. It's an unnecessary expense. I do not like private equity in anything. I think allowing private equity into college sports is a very dangerous game to play because private equity ruins everything it touches. But it's all being done in college football in the name of money. That's why we expanded the playoff. It was partly about giving other teams a chance after Florida State got screwed. You could also argue in 2023 that Georgia got screwed and Georgia beat Florida State by 60 in a bowl game. So that argument doesn't really carry as much water. But it was always just about money. Oh, we can sell more advertisements. And I just don't like that. I know my voice is not going to carry any weight. I know it's not going to do anything. But I don't think that we ever should have gone away from the 4-team playoff. Because, shoot, bowl games still meant something in the 4-team playoff. If you didn't make the playoff, you had a chance to beat Jackson Smith and Jigba in the Rose Bowl and go for 300 yards and make history on a big stage in a meaningful game, even if you didn't make the playoff. Now it's 12 teams. The bowl games don't mean as much as we've talked about. But James Madison gained over 500 yards against Oregon and outscored them in the second half. Picked off Dante Moore twice. The Dukes, in my eyes, proved that the group of 5 still deserves a shot in the playoff. And if Power 4 teams don't like it, I have a solution. Play better. Play better. I know a lot has been made of Indiana's non-conference schedule this year. My counterpoint is that Indiana didn't lose. Indiana cleared every hurdle in the regular season and was rewarded for it. And if you don't like your situation in the playoff, whether you were included or not, Notre Dame, you shouldn't have lost to the good teams you played, Miami and Texas A&M. My favorite was when a Notre Dame fan account tweeted yesterday Notre Dame would beat either of these teams, referring to the Miami-Texas A&M game that ended 10-3 in favor of the Hurricanes. Oh, Notre Dame would beat either of those teams? Gee, I wonder if they played in the regular season. Oh, they played in the regular season. Wow. And did Notre Dame win either of those games? I'm getting word that they didn't. Oh, interesting. Wow. It's almost like you had your chances and you blew it. Indiana had chances and took advantage. That's why they're the top seed playing in the Rose Bowl against the former Indiana assistants, Kalen DeBoer, Kane Womack, Nick Sheridan, among others. What a sentence. Never thought I'd say that. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday on WGCL. Back here on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rotacap with you, and I don't want to talk about IU basketball because they're just so odd, uninspired, hot and cold, Jekyll and Hyde, streaky, strange. Nothing encapsulates that better than yesterday's game against Chicago State. And before I talk about Chicago State, I need to establish that by all weights and measures, be it points per game, opponent points per game, shooting percentage, rebounding, they're one of the worst teams in the country, Chicago State men's basketball. Indiana should have won this game by at least 35 points, maybe 40. That's how bad Chicago State is. Instead, what I saw at Assembly Hall yesterday when I was covering that game while watching Texas A&M Miami, I'll admit, I had that game on while I was covering the IU basketball game, was one of the weirdest dualities of a basketball team that I've ever witnessed in the same game. Because Indiana in the first half, 50-plus points, 56% from the floor, 54% from three. Wow, that's pretty good. They were on pace to blow the program record out of the water for the most three-pointers made in a single game. You're looking somewhere around 25, 26, 28. In the second half, Indiana got outscored by Chicago State, 29-26. Won the game 78-58. 20-point win, but against a team where you should have won by 35 or 40. Why did that happen? Well, Indiana's shooting splits in the first half, 56, 54, 100. Indiana's shooting splits in the second half, 27% from the floor, 5% from three, 1 for 20 from three, 56% from the free throw line, missing 7 of 16 free throws in the second half. 27-5-57 splits in the second half. That perfectly encapsulates the problem with this Indiana men's basketball team. It does. You have some moments, usually it's a whole game, where the shots are falling and the shooting is great and everything is good when you're jacking up 53s. You've had other games this year. In my mind, the two that stick out are Incarnate Word, and Lindenwood, where the shots don't fall and you have to lean on your defense and your rebounding. to win the game. The problem with yesterday against Chicago State is that both of those identities appeared in the same game, and the rebounding wasn't even that good. Darren DeVries said as much after the game. Said that for whatever reason, it hasn't settled in Indiana's brains that rebounding and physicality are going to be of the utmost importance in the Big Ten. Indiana gave up 11 offensive rebounds to Chicago State yesterday. Now, Chicago State is actually a decent offensive rebounding team. That's one of the only things that they're good at, not ranked outside the top 330 is offensive rebounding. But it was dreadful watching Indiana in the second half against Chicago State yesterday because there was no adjustment made. It was, we're just going to keep chucking up threes. We started the second half 0 of 16. Didn't make a three for the first 11 minutes out of the locker room. Let's just keep shooting him. And I understand that you have to keep your shooters confident. Lamar Wilkerson looked great out the gate yesterday against Chicago State. He had 9 of Indiana's first 14 points. Helped him open up a 10-point lead in the first 3 minutes. I understand that you have to keep your shooters feeling good. But there is a line between that and just outright refusing to adjust. And I am worried that the latter is what's happened to Indiana men's basketball. Because when you don't have a true big, you don't really have a choice but to keep chucking up threes, even when it doesn't work. And as we saw already against Minnesota earlier this month in Indiana's first Big Ten game, if the threes don't fall against a team that's more physical, and don't get it twisted, Minnesota's not that good as far as Big Ten teams go. But if you do not have a backup plan, you are screwed. That's why Indiana lost that game to Minnesota. Also, it's because Minnesota's perimeter shooting, for whatever reason, just decided to turn it on in the second half of that game. But Indiana cannot afford to have Tucker DeVries go 2 of 11 from three-point range in a Big Ten game. You cannot keep putting up tour dates. 8 points on 12 shots for DeVries. Didn't get to the line once. Indiana as a team got to the line a whole bunch in the second half, mentioned 16 times, but only 18 times for the game. Because in the first half, the three-point shots were falling, so they weren't getting paint touches. Problem is, in the second half, the three-point shots were not falling, and they did not get paint touches until late. You cannot refuse to adapt. It just will not work in the Big Ten. You've got Siena tomorrow, and then Big Ten games for the rest of the season. That's great. You completely screwed up your only 2 big opportunities in non-conference play. And I know that not North Carolina, goodness gracious. I know that Kansas State and Marquette are usually decent. Marquette more so, under Shaka Smart. Both of those teams are having putrid seasons. Those wins are not going to look as good on a resume as we initially thought that they could. That's not Indiana's fault. What is Indiana's fault is turning the ball over 18 times against Kentucky and going down 16-0 at the start of the game against Louisville. Indiana is in serious trouble of missing the NCAA tournament. They might not win any more games than they won last year under Mike Woodson. Sure, the play style might be more entertaining when it goes right, but it's just as frustrating when it goes wrong. That is the frustration. That is the disappointment. That is the gripe. Especially because we've seen what this team can be, what they can do when they're on. But when they're off, it is so vastly different. The consistency is not there. And if you don't have a consistent play style, something that you can grind out games with, big physical games, you can't bang it in down low with this team. You can't do it. Purdue is going to kill Indiana. A couple 7-footers, Trey Kaufman-Renn, who's a phenomenal big as well. I just don't see it happening. I don't see Indiana beating Purdue. I don't see Indiana beating Michigan. Michigan's one of the best teams in the country. I don't see anybody beating Michigan, period. But, man, Indiana's got a lot of questions to answer. Time is running out. We'll talk more about it after this. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday on WGCL. Back here on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rotacap with you. Indiana and Alabama will face off in the Rose Bowl on New Year's Day. That's a week from this coming Thursday. And again, this is the last show before New Year's because at this time next week, I will be on a flight to Southern California. I'll be covering the Rose Bowl. You can follow along the Hoosier Network for all of my coverage. It's categorically insane that this is happening. I people say, "Oh wow, what an exciting opportunity for you to be part of this crazy ride and broadcast at Autzen Stadium and broadcast the Big Ten Championship." And I'm thinking, man, yeah, I obviously did the work to be in this position, but the only reason that I am in this position is because I was born in 2003. If I was not a senior during this school year, none of this would be happening. Maybe if I was a junior, some of it would be happening, but less of it, comparatively speaking, would be taking place. I was looking at the calendar, and the next time that I broadcast a men's basketball game will be at the Chrysler Center on January 20th. That's the day after the national championship, which means that if Indiana makes it, then I won't be able to call that game unless I fly from Miami to Detroit, which could happen, actually. We'll see. We might figure it out. That'd be a heck of a way to miss a bunch of class, though. Say, oh, yeah, I've got to go cover the national championship, and then I've got to fly to Michigan to call a men's basketball game. That'd be pretty cool. But an incredible, incredible ride that this program has been on over the last couple of years under Curt Cignetti, and I'm just lucky to be a very small part of it as far as student media is concerned. It's going to be fun. But Indiana football looking to become the first top seed in the expanded playoff to win after the bye. We talked about it a little bit early on. I don't think it's going to be a problem for them because of the way this coaching staff operates. Omar Cooper told us earlier on in the season, I think it was before the Maryland game, about what Curt Cignetti does to keep his team from becoming complacent. And obviously you heard the Big Ten championship speech of, I've got 3 weeks to get this team humble and hungry for the playoff. That is what he preaches. And from everything that we hear from the players, he lives it, and they live it too. The buy-in, as we've seen all season long, is very hard to match. Very hard to match for other teams. Because it's one thing for a coach to preach something. It's another thing for them to live it. And as far as we can tell, obviously I'm not in those meetings. I'm not at the practices because they're close to the media. But from everything the players tell us, the buy-in is there. And that makes me think that they are staying sharp amid a very long off period. And with Alabama being as sloppy as they are and not having a run game and getting bailed out by a number of Oklahoma self-inflicted mistakes, from dropped passes to botched snaps to short punts to stupid penalties, late hit out of bounds, that kind of thing. Mental mistakes that allowed Bama back into the game that Oklahoma committed to blow a 17-0 lead. It makes me think that Indiana is going to go into the Rose Bowl well equipped to win. Well equipped to win and prepared and healthy, with the exception, of course, of Stephen Daly, who got injured celebrating in the Big Ten championship game, which is still one of the most mind-boggling things that I've seen, just from a misfortune standpoint. Unbelievably unlucky for Stephen Daly. Unbelievably unlucky. But I think Indiana will be equipped to play well in the Rose Bowl. Favored by 7 points, which is the second largest spread of any quarterfinal game. Only Ohio State at 9.5 tops it. I think Indiana will be okay. Obviously, Fernando Mendoza, if he didn't already, is going to have a massive target on his back because he's the Heisman Trophy winner. And he got all of this recognition and all these accolades. And this is another hurdle that Indiana's going to have to overcome, is when you're the champ, when you're a winner, everybody loves you. The national media, the awards committees, the Heisman Trophy Trust, etc. Everybody loves you. Everybody's giving you praise. How are you going to make sure that that doesn't go to your head? How are you going to make sure that doesn't go to your head? And it's a lot easier said than done, because you're thinking, oh, wow, I've gotten this far. I've accomplished a lot. I'm already cementing my legacy as, in Indiana's case, the best football team in school history. Again, for the second straight year. And you just have to keep going. And that's where I think Curt Cignetti has an edge over a lot of coaches. And that's where I think his players have an edge over a lot of other players, is they've been talking about this all year. Even though they won the Big Ten championship, they're saying all our goals are still in front of us. And Pat Coogan was talking about how everybody in the building, they know what the ultimate goal is. And Aiden Fisher said they know they can take this thing pretty far. And by pretty far, he means, of course, a national championship. If you read between the lines, it's not just a Big Ten title that they're gunning for. And it's tricky. It's tricky to get yourself humbled again. It's very easy to let it go to your head sometimes. But I'm confident in Curt Cignetti's ability to get his players back to zero, so to speak, as far as the ego goes and as far as the thought process goes of, okay, what do we have to do to remain on top? And Fernando Mendoza talked about that with respect to what Curt Cignetti told him once the Heisman Trophy started becoming a possibility was, hey, focus on what got you here. Focus on the process, because that's what made you successful. It's the work that you put in. It's the extra reps that Fernando has taken after practice every day since the spring, throwing to his receivers, establishing that chemistry. That is what has gotten him to this point. It's preparing like no other. No, that's Curt Cignetti's words, not mine, saying that Fernando Mendoza prepares like no other. Which, I mean, Cignetti has been around a lot of really, really talented players. A couple that come to my mind, Phillip Rivers, Julio Jones, and Mark Ingram, with whom he worked when he was an assistant at North Carolina State and Alabama, respectively. Curt Cignetti has been around a lot of really talented players. So for him to praise Fernando Mendoza and say that he prepares like nobody he's ever seen, that means a lot. And I think as your leader goes, you go as a team. You see Fernando Mendoza putting in extra reps, preparing tirelessly, working tirelessly, then you follow suit. Because everybody has seen what it takes to be successful. And obviously everybody wants to win a national championship. There should be no extrinsic motivation that you need for that. But for Indiana, they are not on paper the most talented team in the playoff. That's not a secret. They aren't the biggest. They aren't the most explosive. They're not going to have the most NFL players from this roster, from this year of college football. They're probably not going to have the most NFL players in 5 or 10 years. But I think they are the best coached team. I think they are. Indiana beat Ohio State head-to-head. Ryan Day, I fault him for some of the decision-making in the Big Ten Championship. I also fault their offensive coordinator, Brian Hartline. I thought Matt Patricia had a phenomenal game plan. Indiana's skill players just made some great plays. But I thought Ohio State's defensive coordinator, Matt Patricia, had a really solid game plan. Unfortunately for him, Bryant Haynes, Indiana's defensive coordinator, had a better game plan. And oh, by the way, Ohio State's kicking game has been terrible for the last 5 years, and Jaden Fielding continues to miss high-leverage kicks. We'll go down the line. Georgia. Well, I don't even have to look to Georgia's performance on the field because of all the crap that happens off of it. It's nearly 30 arrests since the start of 2023 for Kirby Smart's program. Remember how Curt Cignetti preaches smart, disciplined, poised? Well, Georgia's program, based on the amount of arrests that we've seen over the last 2+ calendar years, not smart or disciplined. Now, they are a good team, but I don't think that they're very disciplined at all. And what happens on the field proves that. Alabama, puzzling loss to Florida State at the start of the season. The Tide took advantage of Oklahoma shooting itself in the foot more than they did. That's really what that first round game was. Both teams made a ton of self-inflicted mistakes. A ton. Oklahoma just happened to make more. Alabama took advantage of the opportunity. Alabama has some very talented players. Unfortunately, they have not succeeded at the level that they probably should. Example 1A is Ryan Williams, the Tide's star wide receiver, who, of course, had a ballerina, toe-tap, tap-dancing, feather-footed catch against Georgia last year that really put him on the map. Obviously, everybody knew about him because he was a 17-year-old freshman making ridiculous plays, but he has completely fallen off a cliff this year. Fallen off a cliff has Ryan Williams. the Alabama star receiver in his sophomore year. He had 865 receiving yards last year, 8 touchdowns, added 2 rushing touchdowns as well. Ryan Williams this year, 636 receiving yards, over 200 yards less than he did a season ago. He only had 1 catch for 5 yards against Oklahoma, did Ryan Williams. He has had 1 game with over 100 yards receiving, and that was against Wisconsin, a Wisconsin team that, as we know, is terrible. Fernando Mendoza threw for 300 yards and 4 touchdowns against them because they are bad, and also because he is good. But also, again, Alabama doesn't have a run game. They cannot run the ball. Very similar to Maryland in that respect, which probably isn't a comparison that you were expecting to hear. Alabama and Maryland both average less than 3.5 yards per carry. The Tide have 1 rusher with over 500 yards. Jam Miller, 504. Next closest, Daniel Hill, 271 rushing yards for him. That's not balanced at all. That puts a lot of weight on Ty Simpson's shoulders, the quarterback, who has now thrown for 3,500 yards, 28 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. He's also taken 29 sacks. 29 sacks in now 14 games for the Tide at 11-3. 29 sacks in 14 games. That's about 2 sacks per game, we'll call it. There's a little bit of margin for error there. The bottom line is Bama is not as balanced as Indiana offensively. That is for sure. And I think on the defensive side, Oklahoma got off to a great start offensively against Bama. John Mateer then missed a couple throws, made a couple bad decisions, and Oklahoma special teams gave Alabama some really short fields. I feel like every time I looked up, Bama was starting a drive either just behind midfield or on the plus side of the 50, which means the offense doesn't have to do as much work. But I don't think Alabama can beat Indiana, which, again, 2 years ago would have been an absurd thing to say. And I think that's where a lot of Alabama fans are kind of flawed in their mindset. Like, oh, Alabama's going to beat Indiana by 21 points. This is not your granddaddy's Indiana. This is not your granddaddy's Alabama. This is not the dynasty that Nick Saban built. And this is why if you're Kalen DeBoer, you're in a bad situation, because you never want to be the guy after the guy. And he is the guy after the guy. And unfortunately for him, he can no longer take advantage of paying players under the table like Nick Saban did. Allegedly. I have to say that because I don't know how much proof there is, but it's a pretty open secret. If you look at what Brett Bielema said about his time coaching in the SEC, it was like a completely different game down there because they were paying players. And so were some Big Ten schools. Indiana wasn't. If they were doing a really bad job. I don't think Indiana was paying players under the table. But the bottom line is that this is not the Alabama dynasty that Nick Saban led to dominance in the 2000s and the 2010s. This is a Kalen DeBoer coach team that has a ton of flaws on both sides of the ball. And in the kicking game, too. Indiana can beat them. I also think that Alabama has a blueprint to beat Indiana. The recipe up front defensively is very simple. You've got to take advantage of Indiana's weak right side of the offensive line and get pressure on Fernando Mendoza. That is how you can slow down Indiana. And then it comes to stopping the run. But if you cannot stop the run at just like every level of football, you are screwed against Indiana because they run so many RPOs. And if Indiana is able to establish the run and you start selling out on the RPO, then that is when Fernando can beat you. And that is when Indiana's receivers can beat you in one-on-ones. We saw it against Ohio State a number of times with Charlie Becker. Because Becker won his one-on-ones. After Indiana established the run, Mendoza was able to run the RPO offense and make some gorgeous throws to where only his receivers could catch them. And box score watchers will tell you, yes, Fernando Mendoza threw a pick. That pick was an extremely fluky play where a screen pass hit Riley Nowakowski in the back and ended up in the hands of Davison Igbinosun. That was Mendoza's pick in the Big Ten Championship game. But Indiana has the blueprint to beat teams offensively. Obviously, it starts on the ground, but the RPO game is what makes Indiana so successful through the air. If you can't establish the run thing, then things become a little bit more complicated. But as we saw, for example, against Oregon and Penn State, Indiana didn't run the ball well in either of those games, especially Penn State. If Fernando Mendoza needs to win you the game, he has shown that he can do that. He did it against Ohio State. Indiana had to throw the ball. Mendoza made a phenomenal throw, 33 yards on 3rd and 6, when most teams would probably either check it down or just run it and punt. Indiana didn't do that. Trusted their Heisman Trophy quarterback to make a play. And he did. So Indiana, very balanced offensively. If you're going to beat Indiana's defense, you need NFL caliber talent. I think that is clear, number one. You think back to the Penn State game. Nicholas Singleton is going to be playing on Sundays. He is a ridiculously good running back, as is Katron Allen. That is how Penn State was able to hang with Indiana. Could have beaten them. Could have. Woulda, coulda, shoulda, right? Oregon, NFL caliber talent on that roster as well. Dante Moore, the quarterback, will be playing on Sundays. Oregon's edge rushers, Amari Washington and Tatum Tuioti, will get drafted. Very good players. I don't know about Bryce Betcher or Jerry Mixon. Brandon Finney, freshman defensive back. He was the one who had that pick six against Indiana that tied the game at 20 in the fourth quarter. He's a true freshman. He's going to be a star for a long time. You need that caliber of talent to beat Indiana. And even Ohio State obviously has a ton of that talent, right? On both sides of the ball. Defensively, Sonny Styles, Arvell Reese, Caleb Downs in the secondary, Caden Curry coming off the edge. And it still wasn't enough to beat Indiana. But Ohio State's defense kept Indiana's offense in check. I don't know that Alabama has that level of talent combined with that level of scheming compared to Ohio State. They haven't shown me much to impress me this year, outside of beating Georgia on the road. That's it. That's the only thing Bama has done to really impress me this year. I mean, you look at their schedule. Yes, they beat Oklahoma on the road. But then when Kirk Herbstreit went on the broadcast and was talking about how part of Bama's gauntlet schedule included Vanderbilt, Mizzou, and Tennessee, I started laughing. Yes, those teams have tiny numbers next to their name. Vanderbilt was always going to be a good but not great team. Now, don't even get me started on Diego Pavia. He's a loser. Missouri and Tennessee never should have been ranked. And I'll stand by that because Tennessee finished 8-4. Tennessee was ranked at the end of the season because they were ranked at the beginning of the season. It's the cycle of preseason SEC bias, keeps the teams in the rankings, and then when another team beats that overranked team, it becomes, oh wow, look at how strong the conference is because of the number next to the name, which was placed there by AP voters that largely don't actually watch the sport. Missouri also finished 8-4, losing to Vanderbilt, getting blown out by A&M, and losing 17-6 to Oklahoma. Their wins in the SEC, Mizzou, South Carolina, Auburn, Mississippi State, and Arkansas. 4 teams that finished at the bottom of the barrel. That is not a team that deserves to be ranked. I'm sorry. Mizzou did not deserve to be ranked at any point because they never beat anybody good. That win over South Carolina only looked good because South Carolina was ranked at the beginning of the season. Because, Lenora Sellers, Heisman Trophy, yada, yada, yada. Got blown out against A&M. Really the only good team they played outside of Alabama where they lost by 3. That goes back to the quality loss discourse. But to suggest that Bama had a gauntlet schedule is laughable. Laughable. I would actually put their schedule on par with Indiana. I really would. Because you've got teams in your conference that are mid to below average. You got a couple good teams, and you got some cupcakes. Difference is Indiana beat everybody. Alabama did not. It's going to be a very tough test for Alabama. And that's where I think a lot of Bama fans, again, I don't think they understand. Yeah, of course, Indiana doesn't have the talent level, which goes back to recruiting stars. But Curt Cignetti has proven that recruiting stars are a joke as far as accurately predicting a team's success over the course of a season. He has done more with less consistently throughout his coaching tenure, not just at Indiana. But everywhere he's been, he's done more with less. And I would expect the Rose Bowl to be no different. Oregon, Texas Tech. The winner of that game plays either Indiana or Alabama in the Peach Bowl. That's an interesting one. The 4-5 game. Oregon, as the 5 seed, is favored by 1.5. That game at Hard Rock Stadium on New Year's Day, 12 o'clock p.m., the Capital One Orange Bowl. It's going to be fun. Texas Tech, a phenomenal defense. Big 12 champions. Hasn't given up double-digit points since November 1st, when they gave up 20 to Kansas State on the road. That was only the second time this year that Texas Tech had allowed more than 17 points. The other one was in the loss to Arizona State, when they allowed 26. Texas Tech's defense is ridiculous. Indiana's defense, very similar to Texas Tech. When they played Oregon, you could tell that the defense was giving Dante Moore fits. Disguised coverages, simulated pressures, caused him to miss some open reads and make some questionable decisions with the football. Texas Tech has the blueprint to beat Oregon because Indiana gave it to him back in October. And they've certainly got the tools in place to make it happen. Do the Red Raiders. Linebacker Jacob Rodriguez, the Butkus Award winner, who a lot of people thought should have been a Heisman finalist. I was one of those people. I thought he deserved to be there more than Diego Pavia did, but yeah, obviously the voters didn't think that. Texas Tech has a chance to beat Oregon, and then it becomes basically Indiana-Ohio State Part 2 if Indiana were to face Texas Tech. Because Texas Tech is kind of like Ohio State in that they lean on their defense more than their offense. Both of those teams among the best defensively in the country. Indiana is too. But it's going to be very intriguing no matter what. I mean, if you can't find a way to make a national championship semifinal, or excuse me, a playoff semifinal interesting, then that is on you, my friend. But very excited for the NY6 Bowls. Like I said, I'll be in Pasadena to cover that game. We'll have a student radio broadcast as well, 99.1 WIUX. What an opportunity for this Indiana football program. And a chance to further make history and cement Curt Cignetti's case as the leader of the greatest turnaround in college football history. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday on WGCL. Back here on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rotacap with you. It is almost Big Ten play season for Indiana basketball, and the news, my friends, is not good. Not good. Indiana men's basketball, 9-3, but those 3 losses are the ones that hurt. Shocker. I know. Losses to Louisville, Kentucky, and Minnesota. That Minnesota one still leaves me scratching my head. This Indiana team is so hot and cold. I said on Twitter yesterday, they're more hot and cold than a Katy Perry song. And I figure if John Rothstein, the CBS college basketball reporter, is not going to give Indiana a tagline, then I'll do it myself. So there you have it. Indiana men's basketball, more hot and cold than a Katy Perry song. Recession pop, that was something else. I was in kindergarten when the recession happened, so I don't really remember the negatives of it. I just remember the good stuff? I don't know if that's the right way to put it. In any case, Indiana's three-point shooting certainly hit a recession in the second half yesterday against Chicago State, as the Hoosiers started the half 0 of 16 from 3 and finished 1 for 20 after going 14 for 26 in the first half. And here is something that I think got lost in the shuffle from that game. Sam Alexis played 18 minutes as a starter because he had been making his case throughout the early going that he should start over Reed Bailey. This was his third start in as many games, taking over for Bailey as the starting center. 18 minutes, 2 points. 2 points in the first half. That was it. Did not get to the free throw line, did not score in the second half. Odd. Very odd. Part of that is a byproduct of Indiana chucking up threes. My thing is, the game started with a Sam Alexis dunk. He is a frequent flyer at the rim for Indiana. Frequent flyer. I don't understand why when the threes didn't fall. You'd think at some point while you're in the process of missing 16 consecutive threes against Chicago State, one of the worst defensive teams in the country, allowing over 85 points per game entering yesterday. You'd think at some point as you miss your first 16 threes, you think, maybe we need to get the ball down low. Maybe we need to play through the post instead of jacking up threes from Martinsville and Seymour and Columbus. No, that never really clocked to Indiana until later on in the second half, and Darren DeVries said that Indiana did run some plays, try to get guys open down low, try to get touches in the paint, try to score at the rim. It just didn't work. Oh, that's good old coach speak. We just didn't execute. That is not going to work against Big Ten teams. We have already seen that it's not going to work against Big Ten teams. Go back to the Minnesota game. I was watching that and I was thinking, man, there's a lid on the rim. Weird things happen in the barn. It's been the case for years, man. Weird things happen there, although I will say Mike Woodson never lost to Minnesota. Weird things happen, but he always found a way to win. For that, I say that we should all apologize to Mike Woodson. Again, I don't think Indiana is going to win any more games than they did last year. I don't. I've had to really temper down my expectations since the Marquette win, knowing how awful Marquette is going to be in the Big East this year. Marquette, I don't think, has beaten a Power 5 team yet. Power 4. Well, no, Power 5 in college basketball because of the Big East. Well, look at Marquette, what they've done. They are 5-8, losers of 4 in a row. Oh, no. Marquette playing power conference teams this year. Obviously, the big loss to Indiana, a loss to Maryland, a loss to Oklahoma. Valparaiso took them to double overtime. Back-to-back 20-point losses to Wisconsin and Purdue, and then a loss to Georgetown and Creighton. So that holds true, that Marquette still has not beaten a power conference team. And again, they went to double overtime with Valparaiso at home. Go Beacons. Shout out to 219. That win over Marquette means a lot less than I think anybody thought it would. And again, that's not Indiana's fault. It's kind of the same discourse we had with football last year. Indiana had the defending national champion and the national championship runner-up on its schedule, and then they both happened to suck because they got massively overhauled from a roster and coaching standpoint. That is not Indiana's fault. Neither is Kansas State being bad. Kansas State had the nation's leading scorer in P.J. Haggerty at the time that they came to Bloomington, and then all of a sudden, Connor Enright stuffed Haggerty in a locker, and K-State got embarrassed. K-State 8-4 to start the season, losing to Nebraska before they came to Bloomington and lost. Then they got upset at home by Bowling Green, lost to Seton Hall at home, got right against Mississippi Valley State, and then beat Creighton 83-76 last Saturday. That's actually a good win for K-State. Came back home, beat South Dakota. They take on ULM before Big 12 play begins after the turn of the calendar. So maybe there's a chance that K-State win is going to look a little better, but right now it doesn't. And then obviously, as we talked about earlier, Indiana had two other opportunities to pick up big non-conference wins. Louisville, you're down 16-0. Well, Indiana tried to come back from that, but the final score is deceiving. That game was not as close as it looks, 87-78. That was not a 9-point game. Louisville kept Indiana at arm's length for that entire game after going on a 16-0 run to start things. I don't think any team, much less Louisville, is going to let you back into a game when you start off by spotting them 16 points, especially not a team that good that is that well coached. Pat Kelsey leading the charge. And then Indiana goes to Lexington last Saturday and plays Kentucky. And the first half was good. 7-point lead going into the break on the road. You're feeling pretty good about yourself. You know, you're not shooting well from three, but you're still finding ways to score. Not shooting well from three. 3 of 14, but you're finding ways to score. You're converting at the free throw line. There were a lot of fouls in that game. Awful officiating. So many fouls. Over 60 combined free throws. Indiana shot 19 in the first half, made 18 of them. Okay, great. You're giving yourself a chance. Second half, you don't get to the line as much. You turn the ball over. You go 27% from the floor and 1 of 10 from three. Kentucky on the other side didn't shoot from three that particularly well either. The difference is Kentucky had 23 points off turnovers. Indiana had 6. Also, Kentucky, 42 bench points against Indiana. So, okay, Mohamed Diabate, Jalen Lowe combined for 27. Okay, fine. Hard to win at Rupp Arena. Hard to beat Kentucky. I was thinking that Indiana had a shot because, by all accounts, it is a down year for Kentucky. Otega Oweh couldn't muster up adequate effort to play Michigan State at Madison Square Garden on national television for the Kentucky Wildcats. How in the world can you not give enough effort to play at your best in that game on that stage? If you can't do that, playing in the world's most famous arena in front of a national audience against another ranked team, against another storied program led by a phenomenal coach, I don't think you're going to make it, brother. Indiana couldn't beat that Kentucky team. Now you're out of non-conference opportunities to boost your at-large resume. They're gone. You need to root for Kansas State to have a great Big 12 season. Otherwise, your non-conference games aren't going to do any heavy lifting for you in the NCAA tournament come selection time. And this January schedule, Murderer's Row. Murderer's Row. You've got Nebraska, Michigan State on the road, Iowa at home, Michigan on the road the day after the national championship in football, Purdue at home, UCLA on the road. There are very few easy Big Ten games anymore. Rutgers, yes, absolutely. Rutgers will be easy. I'm not denying that. Maryland, maybe. Washington, maybe. I don't think that Indiana can have this Jekyll and Hyde thing go on for much longer. But with the lack of depth and with no real post play, Reed Bailey, maybe, but he at times can look really soft and unassertive. He kind of reminds me of Xavier Booker. I watched Xavier Booker play when I was at Cathedral High School. I was there as a student. He was a year behind me. He was the most unassertive 6'10" player I've ever seen. And from that philosophy, that's kind of what Reed Bailey reminds me of. He's 6'10", but he doesn't play like he's 6'10". That's the thing that gets me, is that Bailey can be inadequate on the physicality side at times. And as we know, the Big Ten, it's rough out there as far as physicality goes. Darren DeVries knows that, talking about how Indiana has to be physical, has to want it on the glass. Giving up 11 offensive rebounds to Chicago State isn't going to cut it. It's just not. It's just not. Chicago State outscored Indiana 30-22 in the paint. Can't have that. I know Indiana chucked up 46 threes, but I'm going to say it again. At some point, when you're starting a half 0 of 16 from 3, you probably need to realize that you have to adjust. And Indiana just didn't. It was so frustrating watching them continue to chuck up threes time and time again and miss them. At some point, you got to drive. You got to get into the paint. And they didn't do that enough. You cannot do that against a Big Ten team. You might not go 500 in Big Ten play if you continue to try to live off of the shoot first because we need to keep our guys confident mantra. I understand there's a fine line between telling your guys, hey, I know you're a confident shooter, but we need you to stop. There's a fine line between saying, hey, we need that, and we also need to score. Darren DeVries has to get it figured out. Has to get it figured out. Because yesterday was the most unconvincing, uninspired, question mark-inducing 20-point win that I've seen for Indiana men's basketball in a long time. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday. Back here on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rotacap with you. Indiana women's basketball in action today. They got some interesting news after the game against Eastern Michigan last Sunday. I was on the call for that on Big Ten Plus. Valentina Kadlitsova, one of the international players on the team that had started the first 10 games before coming off the bench, being benched for a freshman, actually. Came off the bench against ULM about 10 days ago and then did not play last Sunday after getting benched the game prior. She left the team. She has returned home back to Europe. So this Indiana women's basketball roster, you kind of knew this was going to be a down year for them. They're 10-2. but their wins have been unconvincing at times, and they got blown out by Illinois in their first Big Ten game. They nearly lost at home to Marshall somehow. That game was awful, 40-ish combined turnovers. They've been very, very questionable at times. They play Western Carolina today at 1 o'clock before Big Ten play resumes on Monday, December 29th, the Monday after Christmas. This Indiana team is really, really thin roster-wise. There is not a lot of depth. They're without starting forward Zania Sokaguman. Don't know what her injury outlook is. It's week to week right now. She's been seen with a boot on her foot. That's a big loss for Indiana. And her absence is felt because the post play just isn't there. And the injuries stacking up, youth, having to lean on Shea Chesky way too much. Way too much. He's been asked to basically carry the entire offense. That's going to work against subpar teams. I don't know how it's going to work in the Big Ten. I really don't. But their non-conference slate closes today against Western Carolina. The first 500 early arriving fans will get a Hoosier the Bison beanie. It's a white beanie with Hoosier the Bison art on the front. Actually, it's pretty cool. It looks pretty cool. If I did not have other obligations, I would actually go to that game just to get the beanie. And then I'd probably leave because the product on the court can be frustrating at times, which is no slight on Terry Morin at all, because she's doing the best with what she has. Unfortunately, it just is a down year for Indiana women's basketball. That is the long and the short of it. I wanted to take a moment because when Indiana volleyball hosted Nebraska in the latter part of the regular season, Nebraska fans watching the Big Ten Plus broadcast got mad because Indiana's student section was loud. That is the long and the short of it. That game was about a month ago. Nebraska won, swept Indiana. The Huskers, undefeated going into their NCAA tournament matchup with Texas A&M. And I know, why am I talking about Nebraska volleyball on this show? But I have a connection to this, I promise. Nebraska gets upset by Texas A&M in the regional final. Nebraska was the 1 seed, undefeated, had swept something like 25 consecutive matches, hadn't lost a set since September 16th. Or excuse me, they had lost 1 set since September 16th, and then lost in 5 sets to Texas A&M in Lincoln. In Lincoln, Texas A&M is playing for the national championship against Kentucky. Now, Nebraska fans, I have a question for you. You got mad when Indiana and its students were yelling at your players trying to serve, which, by the way, happens at every single Indiana volleyball match and happens at every college volleyball match across the country. God forbid students are loud trying to support their school and distract opposing players. Have Nebraska fans ever watched any sport in their lives besides volleyball? They think they're God's gift to the Big Ten. What have you accomplished? I'm not talking about volleyball here. I'm talking about Nebraska as far as the revenue sports go. What has your program contributed to this conference since you joined it a little more than 10 years ago? And I'm dead serious. What have you contributed other than the fakest sellout streak in college football and the epitome of coasting on past success, thinking that it means something now? I haven't contributed much of anything. Oh, congratulations on extending Matt Rule. Nobody wanted him. Your quarterback, who is now gone, is most famous for being a Patrick Mahomes impersonator. Oh, he looks like Patrick Mahomes. That's Dylan Raiola. Glad he's gone. I'm sure Nebraska fans are too. You were the ones taking the credit for Indiana's sellout when you came to town for the homecoming football game last year. So I suppose then that we should also credit you for all of the other sellouts that have taken place at Memorial Stadium over the last 2 years. Everybody say thank you, Nebraska. Were the Nebraska fans mad when Texas A&M's players and fans were celebrating an upset win? Because it is my understanding that Nebraska fans believe that opposing fans should not be allowed to make noise. And also, if there is ever a sellout involving a Nebraska team, it is because of the Nebraska fans, not because of the fans of the other team. Sorry, Texas A&M. You can't celebrate your upset win over the Huskers. Nebraska fans are going to get mad. It's just so odd to me. It's so annoying. It's so obnoxious thinking that you're better than everybody else. Just because you exist. Oh, go Big Red. Look, I'm not going to deny there are some cool Nebraska fans out there. The way they travel to support their teams is unique. I respect it quite a bit. But I can't get behind thinking that you're better than everybody else. And as happened when you were watching the Big Ten Plus broadcast of Indiana versus Nebraska, which, by the way, the screenshots that went viral from that were taken completely out of context. It was a close-up shot on a server who backed up all the way to the student section. It was not like they were walking onto the floor and yelling in her ear. But sorry, Nebraska fans, or sorry, Texas A&M fans. Nebraska's going to get mad that you celebrated, so you can't enjoy your win. I apologize profusely to you. Profusely. We turn our focus now, because I will not be on this show next week, because I will be on a plane to Burbank, California. If you're flying to California and you're trying to go to Pasadena, fly into Burbank instead of LAX. I got that from Henry Thuss, one of my friends in the media school who is a Pasadena native. I'll be crashing at his place, which is 5 minutes from the Rose Bowl, which is ridiculous to say. Apparently, he lives in the same neighborhood as Shohei Ohtani. But I'll be on the way out there next week, Indiana and Alabama in the Rose Bowl. It's actually so funny because Curt Cignetti obviously was an assistant at Alabama. Kalen DeBoer was the offensive coordinator at Indiana. Big piece in Michael Penix's success. It's so funny that these coaches will converge with programs that each played a huge role in their journeys to becoming head coaches. Curt Cignetti and Kalen DeBoer. I'm excited that Indiana finally gets a shot at an SEC team, because all we've had to hear about for the last 2 years, the hypotheticals. SEC teams would beat Indiana by 700 points. Did you know the SEC yesterday improved to 1,250-0 in hypothetical games? Crazy, right? We finally get to settle it on the field, which is all Indiana has ever asked of any opponent it has faced over the last 2 years. The moment was too big for him last year against Ohio State and Notre Dame. This year, maybe you thought going into Oregon the moment would be too big. Wrong. Thought going into Penn State, a place where Indiana had never won, the moment would be too big. Wrong. How about Ohio State? Rematch, Big Ten championship. Wrong. The moment was not too big. Indiana is more than ready to take on an SEC team. This group is as battle-tested as any you'll find in the country. Curt Cignetti, maybe a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. Some regard him as Saban's lost prodigy. He paved his own path. He's made it to one of the elite conferences in college football, and he has a chance to prove that Indiana can win the granddaddy of them all, appearing there for the first time since 1967. It is going to be unbelievable. 4 p.m. New Year's Day from Pasadena. Don't miss it. You've been listening to IU Sports Sunday on WGCL.